is difficult for many people. And some people struggle because they feel guilty. Some people struggle because they would like to do more, but they don't or can't. And some people struggle because they want to make sure everybody knows what they do, and there's no way to do it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. I'm going to specifically address a question. Why are people afraid to give up their stuff? So I'll try to answer that, and then I'll suggest how to overcome the fear of giving up our stuff. I heard the preacher talking about this last summer, and he said something that I want to share here. He said that he believes what holds up honest Christian people from giving to the Lord, people who love the Lord, is what if. And what if I start to volunteer a lot of my time, and then they want more? What if I become a willing helper? And they say, well, good, now we need you to help over here also. And what if I get sick and I'm not at work for a little while? How am I going to pay my bills? What if my company closes or I get downsized? We're going to be in trouble financially. What if I'm not good enough at what they want me to do? Or what if somebody's better than me at what they want me to do? You see, people think like this. They think, I would like to give my time, treasure, and talent, but I'm just afraid that I'm not going to be able to get by on what's left over. I don't think I can live up to what Rod's been teaching, and I'm not sure I can survive. What if will keep you from ever giving up ownership of your stuff? Instead, you'll always be owner. Instead of being a manager, it'll always be my stuff. It's mine. And you'll begrudge giving it even to God. Now, be honest with me here. If you experienced a financial downfall right now, would you pray this prayer? Dear God, I got laid off from work today, and it doesn't look like I'll be going back very soon. Now, I have not been giving very generously to you for these past several years, so I'm okay. Don't even bother trying to come help me. Didn't need you then. I don't need you now. You wouldn't. You would suddenly become very spiritual. And 3 times a day, you would get down on your knees and you'd pray, God, I'm in trouble. I need you to take care of me. You need to bail me out right here. Or you would pray, God, I think I'm losing my faith in you because I've got a problem and you're not fixing it. What would you pray if for some reason you didn't have all the free time you have right now? You just were so busy. Would you pray, God, I'm still going to serve you? But no, you wouldn't. You'd probably pray, I got to pull back on it. What would you pray if somehow, some reason, for whatever reason, you suddenly couldn't do all the stuff? Your talent was changed. Would you pray, that's okay, God, I don't need you? Probably not. Most of us would start complaining to God. Here's my issue. You need to fix it. Now, does that seem fair to you? Isn't it maybe just a little bit hypocritical that we use our time, treasure, and talent to build up our own kingdom, and then when we get in trouble, we run to God and say, God, you need to take care of this. You need to bail me out. I have a friend whose children and grandchildren almost never call him up and talk to him until they need something. And then they call up and say, oh, Grandpa, I love you so much. How would you feel? If I'm going to call you up and ask you for a favor of some kind, I am first going to establish and hopefully maintain a good friendship with you. I want to be a part of your life and have you be a part of my life. I don't want you to think that the only reason I'm calling you is because I'm in trouble. Over the past 2 sermons, we've identified some important truths and principles. And I want us to review those because these are the things I want to stick in your head. We began with this concept. We all have stuff, the 3 T's, right? Time, treasure, and talent. That's what God gives us. Everyone here has stuff. And we identified first, though, that everything belongs to God anyway. It's His. Whatever He gives to us, it's still His. And we identified that I am not my own. I belong to somebody. I either belong to God or Satan, or those are the only choices. And that's true of you. You either belong to God or you belong to Satan. And thirdly, God is watching. He's watching what I do with that stuff that He gave to me, and He applies 2 principles. One is this: what we do with what God gives us determines to whom we belong. God looks at that, and He knows. He knows if I belong to Him or to Satan. And secondly, To God, our stuff is a tool to accomplish his will. It is a test of my faithfulness. Am I faithful with what he has given me? And it is a trademark, because a trademark identifies who I belong to. And then last week we expanded on those with two other truths, one of them being this: everything comes from God. Everything belongs to God and everything comes from God. You remember we talked about that? And then the last one was God distributes everything. Everything is distributed by God. Everything belongs to God, everything comes from God, and everything is distributed by God. So if we're going to ask God to help us out when we're in trouble, would you agree with me in this principle? If I want God to be involved in my life when I'm struggling, it would be better for me to be involved in his life now. You agree with that? For example, wouldn't it be better to get God involved in your money life right now while everything's good and you're okay financially, before you have a crisis? If everything you have, time, treasure, and talent, belongs to God, and you're faithfully managing that, you'll have no trouble praying this prayer: God, I'm in trouble, but I'm okay. You got it. I know you're going to take care of me. You have seen me through in the past, and you'll do that in the future. I'm good. Now, I'm going to talk about money again, because money is the easiest way to understand this concept. But there's another reason. If you get your money life right with God, you'll find it a lot easier to get your time and talent life right with God. Because that's one of those powerful factors in our lives. Now, if you have your Bibles or your phones, open them to 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Because I'm going to show you in there how Paul tells us we can get God involved in our money lives right now. And then we can relax, knowing that whatever comes, I'm okay. Now, here's the context. The Apostle Paul is collecting money for the Christians in Jerusalem who are under intense persecution. And because of it, they are extremely poor. And the Christians in the church in Corinth have been contributing to a GoFundMe thing. And they have put together a rescue fund, and it is a substantial rescue fund. And Paul, as is going to pass through, he's going to collect that from them, and he's going to take it to Jerusalem for those Christians there. And in this letter, Paul is complimenting them for their generosity. Now, from his writing, we can learn how we get God involved in our lives and keep it there as he compliments them for how good this is. And then we never have to fear any what-ifs once we get this right. So after encouraging their generosity, he wrote in verse 6, "Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously." Now, that's a very simple concept, but we're going to spend more time talking about it anyway. The metaphor is of a farmer who is planting seed, and it's called the law of the harvest. And the farmer knows if you sow a little bit of seed, you'll reap a little bit of crop. But if you sow a big seed, you'll reap a big crop. And every farmer knows he can fertilize, he can till the soil, he can kill the weeds, he can water that stuff, but he knows that ultimately it's up to God. And God will determine what his harvest is. But along the way, he knows this, the law of the harvest: sow little, reap little; sow big, reap big. And as Paul wrote this letter to the Corinthians, they had already promised the gift. They had already collected the gift. So he's not asking them for more money. He's not teaching this because he wants them to gin up some more money. He is celebrating their generosity, and he's using this occasion to teach them this is how you keep God involved in your money life. You see, God set the law of the harvest to work in our lives. The money that he has given us is a tool for his mission. And it's also a test of our faithfulness, and it's a trademark of to whom we belong. And what we learn is that God responds to us according to how we sow. God responds to our sowing, whether we sow big or little. If you want God in your money life, if you want him there all the time, what's the smartest thing you can do? Tell you what it's not. It's not to keep your money to yourself. The smartest thing you can do is to sow big. Imagine a farmer. He stands and he looks in his barn and he goes, "Man, I've got a lot of seed, but if I go out and put this in the field, I won't have any left." Seed stored in the barn doesn't do him any good. Seed planted in the field results in a big crop. That does a lot of good. We don't have to fear what if when we sow big. The thing we have to fear is refusing to sow big. That's where we might have a problem. You know, sometimes we think I'd like to be more generous. I would like to give more, but I'm just not sure I'll be okay. And I think God is saying, look, I know your financial status. I know what's going on in your life. I know to whom you belong, and I'm going to apply the law of the harvest to your life. Now, we all know people who don't love God and don't give generously, and nonetheless, they're extremely wealthy. And that seems a little bit incongruous with the law of the harvest. But we must remember this. There are two sources of financial influence, of all influence in our world. Satan knows that if he can keep you rich, there's a good chance you're not going to feel like you need Jesus. And I'm not talking to those people today. I'm talking to you. You're believers. You know you need Jesus. The smartest thing you can do to get God to bless your money life is to be a generous giver. So what? So big. Because then you'll reap big. We'll move our way through the text here. Verse 7, each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. The contrast here is giving because I have to or giving because I want to. See, Paul doesn't want to have to beg them. He doesn't want to have to pressure them when he gets there. They've already collected. He wants them to just freely say, Paul, take this and use it in God's mission. He doesn't want to have to make them feel guilty. You know, God needs it, and you kind of owe it to him. That wouldn't honor God. I'll tell you this right now. Don't give because I guilt you into it. Don't give because you feel like you have to in order to keep God happy. Don't give because someone else is going to know and you don't want them to feel badly about you. You know, historically, whenever I have done teaching about giving, our offerings go up for a little while. And that's okay, but it's not best. Planned giving is best. Give what you have decided in your heart to give. That's what's best. And honestly, I'm going to tell you this, and I didn't even approve this with the elders first. Listen, if you give because you feel like you have to, or because I talked you into it, just keep it. Just keep it in your pocket. God doesn't need it, and I don't want you to give because I made you feel guilty, and I don't want you to feel badly about our church because we took your money. If you don't feel good about it, keep it, because it wouldn't honor God, no matter how much you gave. So I encourage you to be very prayerful about your giving. Think this through. Decide what you are going to sow. Are you going to sow big or are you going to sow small? Everything belongs to God, and everything comes from God, and everything is distributed by God, and he sees that stuff as a tool and a test and a trademark. So you decide as a family, this is what we are going to give. You plan it, and you just stick with it. You know, when times are good or when times are bad, you just keep sowing exactly as you plan. Lisa and I committed before we got married that whether our church is energetic and spirit-filled or if it's boring and lifeless, whether it's a pressing need or if the money is flowing freely at our church and in our lives, we are going to sow big. And we're going to follow through on the commitment we made. That's how you keep God involved in your money life. Moving on, the apostle tells us why this matters to God. The reason, I'll tell you this right now, you get this. The reason why God allows the law of the harvest to apply to our money lives is because his plan for funding his mission and taking care of the poor is by blessing us so that we can do it. Verse 8, God is able to make all grace abound to you so that in all things at all times, having all you need, you will abound in every good work. My friends, that's financial security. When you sow generously, God is able to give you everything you need at any time you need for anything you need if you're serving faithfully. Now, let me ask you this question. Now, it's not a trick question, but it's a tricky question. Isn't the reason that we don't give generously because we're trying to hold back because we want to have all things for all times, for all needs? Isn't that why we don't give more? Because we're afraid we might not have enough? And so we choose to keep it to ourselves? We're protecting our financial security. That's good management. But God is saying through Paul, just trust me. Trust me on this. As you sow generously into my mission, I have the power to provide for you in ways you never even thought of. I will fill your barns. You will have everything you need every time you need it for whatever you need. Now, can you think of a better financial plan? I asked Jess this last night, and he agreed with me. This is a great financial plan. If you're looking for financial security, what could be better than a promise from the Almighty God that I will make sure you have whatever you need, whenever you need it, for whatever you need? No financial planner can promise you that, but God does, because God owns everything, and God gives everything, and God distributes everything. Verse 9, it is written, He has scattered abroad His gifts to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. This doesn't say that He scattered money to the poor. Poor people have a way of keeping themselves poor, and they need help from someone else. God's plan is that He's going to give money to people who will share it and who will bless someone else. And that's how God's going to keep his commitment to provide for poor people, through us. Now, do you think, if God is doing that, do you think He would take your offering and then turn His back on you and let you fall down the tubes? His plan to fund His mission, to get the gospel to every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth, is through the treasure that He gives us. Does it make any sense to think that God would not let us reap generously so we can keep doing that? Here's another question to ponder. If you were God, who would you give wealth to? Would you give it to the guy who keeps it for himself, or to the guy who blesses others with it? If you were God, you were making the choice. Would you give it to the guy who says, boy, something bad might happen. What if I lose my job? I better keep most of this for me. Or would you give it to the guy who says everything belongs to God, everything comes from God, and everything is distributed by God, and God's looking at what He has given me as a tool and a test and a trademark? Therefore, I'm going to sow generously. Who would you give it to? Verse 10. Now He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed, and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You will be made rich in every way, so that you can be generous on every occasion. And your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. See, the law of the harvest isn't about getting rich so that we can eat, drink, and be merry. See, we're already rich. This is about God giving His stuff so that we can use His stuff in His kingdom to accomplish His goals. And so when we sow big in God's kingdom, God blesses us big, because then we can sow more big. And sowing big not only supplies the needs to God's people, it results in the giver, you, being blessed, and it results in the receiver being blessed by God's goodness. Now understand something. You are rich. Everyone here is rich. You are rich by one of two sources. Either God blessed you so that you can help Him keep His commitment to the poor and to get the gospel into the world, or Satan enriched you to try to keep you from knowing Jesus. See, Satan will continue to enrich you if that will keep you from having a relationship with Christ. And God will bless you if He knows that you're going to minister in His kingdom with it. And He knows who you belong to. Now, one more verse that comes in here with Paul. Because of the service by which you have proved yourself, that's the trademark thing, okay? You have proven yourself, and that's what these people have done. It said, men will praise God for the obedience that accompanies your confession of the gospel of Christ, and for your generosity in sharing with them and with everyone else. Your stuff, your time, treasure, and talent is directly related to your commitment to Christ. And it's a test by which you prove your faithfulness. They did. And it's a trademark of to whom you belong. And so if God is going to provide for the poor, He's not just going to drop money on them. If He's going to get the gospel taken to all the parts of the world, He's going to do it through us. Because all the money necessary for either of those has already been given. It's in our bank accounts. So what do we worry about? Why do we think what if? We trust Him with our eternal lives. Don't you think we could trust Him with our money lives? And so I ask you this morning, do you want God as part of your money life? Probably every single one of us does. Probably every one of us had some time in our lives that said, man, I'm really hurting, God, I need you. And if you haven't ever done that, you probably will someday. Isn't it better to get God involved in your money life right now while everything is good? And I'm telling you, there is no better way to get God active in your life than to sow big of your time, treasure, and talent. That's the best way to get Him involved. See, God could force His way in, But it's best if you invite him in, and you invite him in by sowing generously of time, treasure, and talent. Now, I'll tell you, I could parade up people from our congregation and other congregations. We could spend here all afternoon. I could have people come up and share their testimony of how God has blessed them when times when they were struggling, and they were faithful, and yet they struggled, and yet somehow or another, God took care of them. And I rejoice just knowing those stories, and you probably do too, but there might be some who don't believe it. I would just say give it a try. I encourage you, just trust God. Okay, this is what you said, God. If I sow big, you'll help me reap big. Sow generously of your time, treasure, and talent. You watch how God does that. And you'll be fine. You'll be blessed generously. And again, it's not about getting rich, because we're already rich. This is about partnering with God in what he's doing in our world, which is two things. He's taking care of the poor, and he's getting the gospel to every man, woman, and child. I can't think of a better partnership. So, what do you sow? You sow big or little?